Now, on a happy note, when I was at the Carter house, I don't know, in the 90s, this boy from New Jersey recited that letter on wherever, the museum, and he called me, and he said, Mr. Cartwright, I said, my name's Thomas, my daddy's Mr. Oh, okay. And but he said, I'm getting ready to propose to my girlfriend. I'd like permission to get a copy of this and recite this to her. Go for it. And I sent him a letter. She accepted. He has 3 children now, and I hope it made Marquis happy. I hope it would. You can say there, a shorter letter, but just as poignant. It's right here on Captain Pleasant M. Hope. 46 Tennessee. That's Corporal's Brigade. You know where they were, below the... And this is the first, last, and only letter to his 4-year-old daughter, Annie. Annie never knew her daddy, but she kept this letter until 1923 as a memory of her father. She never knew. He was 31 years old. He died here. And the letter goes like this. Camp Cummings, Noel, Alabama, April 26, 1864. My dear child, it is a great pleasure and delight that I sit down and write you a few lines, which is the first letter you have ever received, and I hope you keep it and save it until you're old enough to read it. By the misfortunes of war, I've been separated from you and your mama, but by the grace of God, I shall soon return, never to leave you until death shall separate us. Now remember, be a good girl, always mind your loving and affectionate mama, and always remember your first letter writer, because he'll always remember you. And I pray to God, in His infinite mercy, He'll protect and spare you from all the horrors of this world. And if He allows you to live a long life, I hope He prepares your soul in this life for the happy place after death. Your affectionate, loving Father, who will always love you, Pleasant M. Hope. Let's move over to the Texas section. That's all Granbury's Texans killed by the gin. 24th Texas Dismounted Cab. Again, his descendants are in Los Angeles today. They don't know how he made it to California or Texas, but I'll tell you one thing, he's tougher than nails, or the Texans wouldn't have had him. These are all tough men, but the Texans brought the bar up just a little bit. I mean, they were, yeah. And killed by the cotton gin. Lieutenant Stokes, give me just a second. Right here. He's also chaplain of the 10th Texas. But after Atlanta fell, they withdrew back to Palmetto, Georgia. Mary Gay was his sister, and she had stored blankets and coats for him before the campaign started. And she rode out there in a wagon to where they were camped at Palmetto, Georgia. And the men were cheering her. You know, Mary, 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 Mary. She didn't understand because what had she done? And General Granbury let her stay in his tent that night. He didn't stay in the tent with her. And then the next day she was leaving, they were cheering her, and she was smiling. She got out of eye range and ear range, and she bawled, cried, broke down and bawled because they were so emaciated, so worn out. In her heart, she knew the war was over with, but they didn't know it. And then her brother is killed here, and there's an old photograph of her in the 1920s, bowed up, as most of us are, and she's in front of her brother's grave like this. James Stokes. His nickname was Thommy. Thommy. That's what she called him, Thommy. Thommy, right here. There, yeah. I could keep you here for 5 hours here, but let's move on to the Missouri. Went down there in the gin. This is a 20-year-old, name was John Harris. He's 20 years old, first and fourth Missouri, and he was the third one to pick up those colors. The two had gone down, and he was killed. And then they handed it to Colonel Hugh Garland, who rode on the works and was killed. 20 years old, right here. As I've already noted, they're half Irish immigrants from the St. Louis area, a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them. And I've adopted them, again, because everybody thinks of Bloody Bill and Quantrill, and I did too 30 years ago. 1st Missouri Brigade started out 5,000 men, had 670 here at Herman. They lost 420 out of 670. Last time they ever laughed before they stepped off about those quotes I gave you earlier. Let's walk over right over here. This is the Arkansas section. Govan's Arkansas Brigade. And here is an uncle and nephew, Frank Gray and John Russell. They lived together, they enlisted together, they slept by each other, marched by each other, certainly ate with each other, and in one volley they're killed right side by side, and look, they're buried together, side by side, 6 Arkansas, Frank Gray and John Russell, right here. Right here. The trees grown around their grave, but, you know, that's the way it goes. And so, really, this tree is a part of them now, isn't it?
They're a part of the tree.
That's right. They're part of the tree. They're part of the tree now. Let's walk down to that first grave of the Mississippi. I've already told you earlier about how he was from New York. He was an Irish immigrant, 3 years old, blah, 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 sergeant. And during the battle, I told you earlier, has back to the enemy, sword out. But he was wounded, and here, and here. And they brought him over to Carnton, blackhead, tall, 6 foot tall, black-headed Irishman, the black Irish, as I told you, so yeah, over here. And he had that Irish brogue. They were excellent. After Shiloh, he's like a colonel of the 15th Mississippi. And they were excellent in drill. And the Atlanta campaign, Peachtree Creek, they came into a skirmish line, ordered to surrender Colonel Mike. He was a poor man. They bought him his horse, Old Bullet, and his uniform, but they loved him. He was pulling out his sword, and the Federals said, "Drop it, I'll kill you." He says, "Look, it's the fate of the captive to hand a sword to the captor." Okay. Then he takes that blade and hits him across the head, as the story goes, and they captured a couple, 100 Federals or something. But you know about the lunch as well. I told you in the afternoon of November 30th. I told you earlier. You know, everybody's having death premonition. He says, "Look, it's the fate of a soldier. Have no qualms about it. Let's go in. Let's go in." They brought him over to Carnton, and the Sisters of Charity were there taking care. They took care of everybody, both sides. And on the retreat from Nashville, Captain Collins came over to check on him, and he was singing songs. Here he has his leg amputated here, and his arm amputated here. And they embraced. He said, "Tell Colonel Robert Larry that Brigadier star is mine. Don't let him get my stars. I'm his senior in rank. I'll do my best, Colonel Mike." That's what they called him. He died on Christmas Day of 1864, Colonel Mike. And I never even knew about him until about 7 years ago. I really admire him a great deal. Colonel Mike. Let's walk over here to the Alabama side. When shall the moment come when I shall lay my armor by and dwell in peace at home? This is James Sandlin, the color sergeant, 35th Alabama, noble sergeant, Christian gentleman. And then he died about 45 minutes later. Right there, James Sandlin. He was 22 years old. Here is Captain of the 20th Alabama and chaplain of the He's 39 years old. He's from North Carolina and moved to Alabama and served in all that war in here until he died. Shelley's Alabama Brigade by that June on November 30th, 64. Right here. This is Captain Samuel D Stewart. That Osage Orange mess, 35th Alabama, he's cutting away with his sword at that Nevada's trying to get through when he's wounded both legs. And he died that night over there at Carnton as well. He was 24 years old, right here. Let's move on. So he was with his brother, twin. His parents died when they were 13. They just tagged along with the Army as water boys, whatever. Then they took them on in. And this is Jackson's Georgia Brigade. That's 30th Georgia. And he was killed below the Carter Hills. And his brother brought this after the war. It became very successful. And the family members have brought dirt from the parents' graves in Georgia and placed it here, and there's flowers that come up. They planted every year. You see where they pop up every year. Just, you know, a normal 16-year-old is a baby today, and not all, but most of them are pretty stupid. I was when I was 16. I was when I was 18, I think, too, maybe 20. I finally started to figure out my father wasn't ignorant when I was about 20, 21. I thought he was the dumbest man on the earth when I was about 15, 16. I stole that from Mark Twain, I admit it. I steal everything. You know, I don't steal everything, but I stole that. But 16-year-olds then were not like they were today. You come in as a kid, there's no time to nursemaid you. Ain't no time to nursemaid anybody. You grow up, and you grow up now, or you're going to be left behind, or you're going to die. And so these were men here at 16, 17. They were not boys. They were men. Their childhood ended. And you had to become a man, or you're not going to make it. And they knew that. Then after the war, these veterans would come home, they get older, old men like me. And I met the senator. Oh, he was grouchy. He was very grouchy. He was very involved. So I said, do you know what battles he was in? No. I said, he fought at Shiloh, Stones River, Chattanooga, Chickamauga, Peachtree Creek, Ringo Gap, everywhere. And Franklin, now you got a clue why he was a little grouchy when he got home? Yeah. Didn't have a lot of patience with young folks acting like, you know, like weak sisters, weak whatever, I don't mean sisters, weak whatever, and they grew up mighty fast.
Yes, ma'am. Your class of hands, was that like soldier to God or brothers and brother to brother?
That's a great question. That's an excellent question. That's pointing to heaven when it does that, but with this, I'm assuming, without knowing, that his brother is holding his other brother's hand. That's what I'm thinking, because the twin put this up here after the war.
That makes
yeah.
Yeah.
How were they able to identify certain people?
The comrade put headboards up and carved the names into it, but some of them fell over, some were rotting, some were being used for firewood by some people, and then and whatever. Sometimes they couldn't identify them, because if you're blown to pieces, blown apart, you can't identify who they are, even if they're in your regiment too. And a lot of different reasons for that. Yeah. Of that horrible stuff of their death, and there's one person in this area. Somebody said something about me throwing humor in this tour, that I was being disrespectful, and I made sure he knew through an associate that I didn't appreciate it all. If he had anything to say to me, he'd say it to my face and not behind my back, and I didn't appreciate that at all. Very few things offend me, but I'm not going to be disrespectful out here. But this is William Diamond Stone. 37 years old, 19th South Carolina, that's Manigault's brigade. General Manigault, by the way, was wounded at the battle. He died from his wound after the war. General Brantley and Sharp. Yeah, Brantley and Sharp was wounded in the battle. That's Johnson's division, that nighttime assault with torches on both columns of the lines. Captain Shaw took over, Manigault was killed. Captain Bishop took over, Sharp was killed. And William Diamond Stone, I read his letters from the family. Very poignant. One is at Atlanta. Dear Bowley, that was his wife's name, Bowley, I think a nickname. He said, I sure wish I were home to eat some of your melons. Do you have any milk? I'd give $1 for a cup of milk right now. That's $70 today, by the way. It sure is hot in Atlanta here. Oh Lord, you lie in Atlanta? Yeah, and in that nighttime assault, he died in that nighttime attack that I described. And the family, I know the family very, very well. And I could recite other letters from him, but you get the idea. He had he and his wife had 3 children as well. I don't know who are Masonic Masons, and I will not ask, but they know what that means. And the lodge in Franklin places for a brother Mason, Lieutenant Bostick, of the 19th South Carolina, I believe, as well. Yeah, here as well, Brother Mason. Colonel Noel Nelson, he was 31 years old. He was from Louisiana, of course. I used to remember the parish. I can't remember. It's a French thing that I can't pronounce. I can barely pronounce English. And with their chaplain, of course, gave them absolution, and they went in, and that was Scott's Alabama Brigade by the railroad cut, and a little bit that way of it, and wounded both legs, brought over to Carnton that night, and he was saying that night, dear God, please end this misery. Please give me 40 grains of morphine and end this misery. It's powder back then, by the way. William Campbell, by the cotton gin, they were putting powder morphine into his wound that morning. Private soldiers were getting it, by the way, when they're sick, but whatever. And please, God, take care of my wife and children. End this misery, please, so I can die. And he died that night. He had a canister, both legs were hit by canister here. And this is Herman, Herman Brunner, as I pronounce it. He's from Issingen, Germany. Issingen, that's how I pronounce it, Germany. and he was 12th Louisiana, and he died on December 2nd of 1865. He was from a place called Farmville, Louisiana, and I don't know quite where that is.